The Earth stood on the precipice of destruction. The Zornak, a merciless alien empire with technology far beyond human comprehension, had consumed countless worlds. Their empire spanned across galaxies, leaving a wake of devastation in their path. And now their sights were set on Earth, a small, fragile planet in the corner of the universe. The Zornak leaders dismissed humanity as nothing more than an insignificant species, primitive and ill-equipped to stand against their power. For years, humanity had lived in relative peace, unaware of the looming threat. But now, everything was about to change. Dr. Evelyn Morgan, a brilliant but unorthodox engineer, had long been skeptical of conventional thinking. She was known for proposing ideas that others deemed impossible. So when Earth's leaders gathered in a desperate summit to discuss how to fight back against the Zornak, it was Dr. Morgan who stood up and proposed the unthinkable: a warship. No, a weapon that should not exist. The concept was revolutionary. The idea of a ship capable of withstanding the crushing force of Zornak weaponry and outmaneuvering their vast fleets seemed like a fantasy. But Morgan was convinced, if humanity was to survive, they had no choice but to push the boundaries of science and engineering to the breaking point. She believed that if the right minds came together, humanity could achieve what was once thought impossible. The project was dubbed Horizon's Might, and it quickly became the focal point of Earth's last-ditch effort for survival. Nations around the globe, once divided, united under the common goal of saving their species. A coalition of the world's best engineers, physicists, and military tacticians was formed, each with one purpose: to build the ship that would change everything. But building such a vessel was no simple task. Dr. Morgan's design was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. The plans included advanced energy systems that could manipulate space itself, materials capable of deflecting even the most powerful energy blasts, and weapons that could cut through the toughest alien armor with ease. Every aspect of the ship defied traditional thinking. No one had any idea how they could make it real, but they had no time to waste. As the project began, the scope of the challenge became apparent. Every day brought new obstacles. Conventional materials couldn't handle the extreme conditions required. New energy sources had to be discovered, and even the laws of physics seemed to be working against them. The team was stretched to its limits, but Dr. Morgan's unwavering belief in their mission kept hope alive. They knew that failure wasn't an option. The Zornak were coming, and humanity's window for survival was closing fast. Meanwhile, the Zornak Empire watched from afar, oblivious to the human efforts unfolding. They continued their expansion, believing humanity was too weak to be of any concern. The idea that such a primitive species could pose a real threat to their empire was laughable. They were wrong. In the dark corridors of humanity's most advanced laboratories, a new hope was being born. Horizon's Might would not just be a ship. It would be a symbol of defiance, a weapon capable of turning the tide of war. But as the team raced against the clock, they all knew that the real battle was still to come, and it would be a fight like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The magnitude of the task ahead became clearer with each passing day. The design of Horizon's Might pushed human knowledge to its limits. Conventional materials were useless. The ship had to be made of something capable of withstanding the intense forces of deep space, while simultaneously interacting with the fabric of reality itself. Dr. Evelyn Morgan, leading the project, knew they needed more than just innovative engineering. They needed to rewrite the laws of physics. With her team working around the clock, Morgan proposed a bold solution. Quantum mechanics could hold the key to the ship's structural integrity. They began experimenting with exotic materials, metals forged under extreme pressure, alloys infused with energy-stabilizing elements, and compounds that could bend light itself. They needed a hull that could absorb energy from enemy weapons without shattering, while also redirecting that energy to power the ship's systems. But the technology didn't exist, so they built it. In secret, deep in underground labs and fortified space stations, Humanity embarked on experiments that had once been dismissed as impossible. As the weeks turned to months, each test met with failure. The materials would either break down under pressure or fail to interact with the ship's energy systems. One experiment resulted in a massive explosion that destroyed a testing facility, leaving the team to rebuild from scratch. The cost was high, but the progress was undeniable. Dr. Morgan's refusal to abandon her vision was the thread that held the project together. She had assembled the world's greatest minds, and together they would not let their efforts be in vain. In parallel, the energy systems for Horizons might presented another challenge. Powering the ship required energy on a scale humanity had never before achieved. A traditional engine wouldn't be enough to warp space, bend gravity, or withstand direct hits from Zornak weaponry. The solution was to harness the very energy of the stars. They developed a new class of reactor, one that could tap into the raw energy of quasars and black holes themselves. Yet even this bold idea came with risks. The reactor could potentially destabilize the entire ship, unleashing an uncontrollable energy burst capable of tearing the vessel apart. No one knew if the reactor would function as intended, but without it, there was no hope of defeating the Zornak. As the ship began to take shape, Dr. Morgan pushed her team further. Every day, they tested new propulsion systems, gravity-altering engines, and weapons systems capable of unleashing devastating power. The challenges kept growing, but so did their successes. Each breakthrough was met with celebration, though no one dared to believe the project was anywhere near completion. There were still far too many unknowns. Meanwhile, the Zornak Empire continued its relentless march toward Earth. Unbeknownst to humanity, the aliens had begun to take notice of Earth's sudden technological leap. Their intelligence networks had detected unusual energy signatures coming from the distant planet. At first, the Zornak dismissed it as a fluke, but curiosity soon turned to concern. What was humanity up to? And more importantly, how could such a primitive species create something that even the most advanced races in the galaxy had never imagined? Earth's leaders were running out of time. The warship had to be ready for battle, but every step forward seemed to be met with a setback. Still, Dr. Morgan's resolve never wavered. If humanity was to survive, Horizons might have to exist, and no matter the cost, she and her team would make the impossible a reality. After years of relentless work, Horizons might stood ready, towering over Earth's vast oceans. It was a marvel of engineering, its design so advanced that it seemed almost unreal. The warship's sleek hull reflected the light of distant stars, and its energy core pulsed with an untapped power that could change the course of history. For Dr. Evelyn Morgan and her team, it was the culmination of everything they had fought for. Every sleepless night, every failed experiment, every setback. And yet this was just the beginning. The moment had finally come. The crew, handpicked from the best and brightest, prepared for the warship's first test flight. No one had ever built anything like this before, and as the crew boarded, their minds were filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Dr. Morgan stood at the control center, watching the crew take their positions. The ship was equipped with technology so new that no one fully understood how they would behave under real-world conditions. But the Zornak were coming. There was no time for hesitation. As the countdown began, the vast warship thrummed to life. Systems powered up, and the ship's engines hummed with energy unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The test flight would take them into low orbit, just far enough to test the warp drive and the gravitational manipulation systems. Everyone knew the stakes. If the ship didn't function as expected, it could disintegrate upon launch, or worse, destabilize and take out the entire testing facility. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. With the press of a button, Horizons might surged into the sky, its sleek body slicing through the atmosphere with ease. The ground below disappeared as the ship rocketed toward the edge of space. The crew braced for impact, but instead of the expected force of the engines, they felt a strange weightlessness. The gravity field around the ship had shifted, making the ship feel lighter than air, as if the very laws of physics were bending to its will. "It's working," Dr. Morgan whispered, her heart racing with exhilaration. But it wasn't just the gravity systems that were working. The warp drive, powered by the star fusion reactor, hummed in sync with the ship's internal systems. Within seconds, Horizons might cross the threshold into deep space, its sensors picking up distant stars and galaxies like never before. This is impossible," one of the engineers gasped, his voice filled with awe. The ship had traveled farther in moments than any human-made vessel ever could. The crew exchanged stunned looks, realizing they had just witnessed something extraordinary, something that could make all the difference in the upcoming war. But as they reveled in the ship's success, an alarm suddenly blared across the ship's control center. A Zornak reconnaissance vessel had entered Earth's orbit. The aliens, who had been watching humanity for years, had finally made their move. The crew scrambled to assess the situation, but it was too late. The Zornak were already preparing for a full-scale invasion. In that moment, Dr. Morgan realized that their test flight had only been the beginning. Humanity's survival no longer depended on theoretical breakthroughs. It depended on whether Horizons might could hold its ground against an alien empire that had conquered countless worlds. The war had begun. The Zornak ship hung in orbit above Earth, a massive, menacing structure of jagged metal and pulsating energy. It was a silent reminder of the alien empire's power, an empire that had annihilated entire civilizations with a single flick of their finger. The Zornak had arrived, and they had not come to negotiate. As Horizons might hung in space, its crew knew the reality of the situation had changed. No longer were they simply testing the ship's capabilities. They were now humanity's first and only line of defense against a ruthless empire that would stop at nothing to see Earth burn. Dr. Morgan's mind raced as the ship's sensors picked up incoming energy pulses. The Zornak were preparing to fire. "Prepare for impact," the captain of Horizons might shouted, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Engage shields, all stations. Prepare for battle." The crew sprang into action, their training kicking in despite the chaos. Dr. Morgan's team had designed the ship with defense in mind, but nothing could prepare them for the intensity of the Zornak's attack. Moments later, a blast of concentrated energy slammed into the ship's shields. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring across the control center. The shields held, but only just. The blast had drained a significant portion of the ship's energy reserves. "Shields holding at 40%, reported one of the engineers, his voice strained. "We need to retaliate," said the captain, his eyes locked on the Zornak ship, now firing a second round of devastating energy blasts. "Return fire, full power to all weapons systems." For the first time, the crew of Horizons might saw their ship's weapon systems come to life. Plasma cannons hummed as they powered up, and energy beams, laced with destructive force, shot toward the Zornak vessel. The Zornak ship's hull glowed as it absorbed the blasts, but cracks began to form on its surface, an indication that the alien technology was not invulnerable. "We're making a dent," another engineer shouted, excitement in his voice. The crew couldn't believe it. Humanity's warship was holding its ground. But the Zornak were not so easily deterred. Their ship retaliated with a volley of missiles, each one designed to break through even the most advanced defenses. "Brace for impact," the captain ordered again, gripping his chair as the ship was rocked by the force of the blasts. Several of the ship's systems flickered, and for a moment, the crew feared they might lose control. But Dr. Morgan's voice cut through the chaos. "Activate the quantum thrusters. We're not going to stand still for this fight." The thrusters, still experimental, were activated. For the first time, Horizons might leaped into motion with unparalleled speed, dodging the Zornak's missiles with precision. The ship, designed to manipulate space itself, twisted through the fabric of the universe, making it nearly impossible for the enemy to track or target. With the Zornak ship momentarily out of range, Horizons might counterattack, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the alien vessel. This time, the Zornak ship was not as fortunate. The blast struck its central core, causing an explosion that tore through its defenses. "Direct hit," the captain said, his voice filled with relief. "The Zornak ship's shields are down. It's retreating." The Zornak ship, now heavily damaged, began to withdraw, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Humanity had won the first battle, but Dr. Morgan knew this was only the beginning. The Zornak were not a species that would be easily defeated. They would regroup, adapt, and return with even greater force. As Horizons might floated in the silence of space, the crew realized something critical. They had proven that humanity could fight back. But in the end, it wasn't just the ship that mattered. It was the spirit of humanity itself, determined, resilient, and united in the face of annihilation. The victory against the Zornak had been hard-won, but it was far from decisive. As the damaged Zornak vessel retreated into the vastness of space, the crew of Horizons might felt a fleeting moment of relief. The mission had been a success, but only by the skin of their teeth. Dr. Morgan knew this victory would only draw the attention of the Zornak even more. They would come back stronger, angrier, and better prepared. "We've bought ourselves time," Dr. Morgan said, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped the room. "But we must use it wisely. They won't let this go unanswered." The Zornak had underestimated humanity once before, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Their retreat wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a strategic move, one that would give them time to regroup and launch a far more devastating assault. Dr. Morgan and her team worked tirelessly, reconfiguring the ship's weapons and reinforcing its defenses, preparing for what they all knew was coming: an all-out invasion. The Zornak, having suffered the first defeat in their history at the hands of a species they deemed insignificant, were now bent on revenge. Their fleet, larger than anything humanity had ever seen, loomed just beyond the edge of Earth's solar system. Zornak warlords were sending waves of ships, each one more advanced than the last. Humanity's singular warship, Horizons might, was powerful, but facing an entire armada would be a different story. Despite the odds, Earth's forces rallied, combining their remaining resources to build a makeshift defense network in space. The plan was simple. Horizons might would serve as the spearhead, striking at the heart of the Zornak fleet, while Earth's remaining ships, modified civilian vessels, would act as a distraction. It was a risky plan, one born of desperation, but it was humanity's best shot. As the day of battle approached, Dr. Morgan couldn't shake the weight of responsibility that pressed down on her. If they failed, Earth would fall. It was a grim thought, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. She had created a weapon that could change the tide of war. Now it was time to see if it could live up to its promise. The crew of Horizons might prepared for the inevitable clash. They trained for hours, running simulations, recalibrating weapons, and reinforcing the ship's shields. Every member of the team understood that their lives were on the line, but more importantly, they understood the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. As the Zornak fleet entered Earth's orbit, the tension in the control room was palpable. Every member of the crew knew that the battle to come would be unlike anything the universe had ever seen. The Zornak were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to crush humanity's hopes once and for all. "Get ready," the captain said, his voice calm but resolute. "This is it. We fight for our future, for our families, for our world." With a final glance toward Dr. Morgan, he added, "We're with you. Let's finish what we started." And with that, Horizons might engaged its engines, cutting through space with deadly precision, leading the charge against the incoming Zornak fleet. The time for defense was over. The time for counterattack had come. The Zornak fleet descended upon Earth like a storm, a vast armada of warships, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single strike. As their ships filled the skies, The crew of Horizons might prepared for the fight of their lives. Every crew member, every soldier, every engineer had one thing on their mind: survival. The Zornak were not interested in negotiation. They were interested in domination. Horizons might. "This is our moment," the captain said, his voice steady as he addressed the crew. "We fought for this, bled for this. We will not let them take our world." Dr. Morgan watched the view screen, her heart pounding in her chest. The alien ships, massive and terrifying, advanced in a perfect formation, their sleek bodies reflecting the light of Earth's sun. She knew this would be humanity's greatest test. But Horizon's might was their weapon. This was their answer to the Zornak's overwhelming power. The ship had already proven itself once. Now it had to do so again. The first blast came from the Zornak flagship, a weapon that fired a concentrated beam of energy capable of obliterating entire continents. The beam struck Earth's upper atmosphere, sending shockwaves rippling across the planet. It was a terrifying reminder of the sheer force the Zornak possessed. But humanity's counterattack was swift. "Return fire," the captain barked, his voice firm. Horizon's might's plasma cannons fired, sending blasts of raw energy toward the Zornak ships. The first wave of shots hit their targets with deadly accuracy, piercing through the Zornak shields. For a moment, it seemed like they might have the upper hand. But the Zornak weren't finished. They retaliated in full force, firing missiles that locked onto Horizon's might's coordinates. The warship's shields flickered as the explosions rocked the hull, sending tremors through the entire ship. The crew scrambled to adjust, but there was little time. Another volley of energy blasts came, this time aimed directly at Earth itself. The Zornak were not just targeting Horizon's might. They intended to wipe out humanity's ability to defend itself altogether. "We can't let them hit Earth's surface," Dr. Morgan muttered, watching the countdown to impact on her screen. They had only moments to stop the attack. The Zornak flagship's cannons charged once again, preparing to unleash another cataclysmic blast. "Activate the quantum shields," Dr. Morgan commanded, her fingers flying across the console. The quantum shields, designed to absorb and redirect immense amounts of energy, flickered to life just as the Zornak's blast fired. The ship rocked as the two forces collided, Horizon's might shields absorbing the full brunt of the energy beam. For a moment, it seemed like the ship would break apart under the strain. But the shields held. "We're still here," one of the engineers shouted, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We took the hit, but we're still in the fight." The captain didn't hesitate. Counterattack. Full force. The Zornak flagship, reeling from the unexpected resistance, attempted to regroup. But it was too late. Horizon's might unleashed everything it had: plasma bursts, electromagnetic pulses, and energy torpedoes, all aimed directly at the alien command ship. The flagship's shields collapsed under the barrage, and in a flash of brilliant light, it detonated in a massive explosion. Direct hit. The crew cheered, but their victory was fleeting. More Zornak ships were closing in, their numbers overwhelming. Horizon's might was strong, but it couldn't hold out forever against such a force. Earth's fate hung in the balance. The battle raged on, the vast expanse of space, filled with the debris of shattered Zornak ships and the flickering lights of Horizon's might as it fought for Earth's survival. The warship had proven its worth, but the relentless assault from the Zornak fleet was beginning to take its toll. Every blast that struck Horizon's might drained its energy reserves, and with each passing minute, the ship's shields weakened. Dr. Morgan could see it on the monitors. There were too many Zornak ships, and they were adapting faster than they had anticipated. "We can't keep this up," one of the engineers said, his voice strained. "We're running out of power. The reactors are unstable." Dr. Morgan knew they had reached the tipping point. The ship was a marvel of technology, but even it had its limits. They had pushed it to the edge, but to fight off the overwhelming Zornak forces, they needed something more, something no one had thought possible. She knew it was risky, but they had no choice. "We're activating the core's full potential," she said firmly, locking eyes with the captain. "We have one shot at this." The captain hesitated for a moment, knowing what this meant. Activating the core at full capacity would overload the ship's systems. It could tear the entire ship apart, but if they didn't do it, Earth would fall. "Do it," the captain ordered. Dr. Morgan gave the command, and the crew worked quickly to initiate the sequence. The ship's central reactor hummed to life as energy coursed through Horizon's might, far beyond what it had ever been designed to handle. The core's energy output skyrocketed, creating a blinding glow as the warship's systems whined under the strain. The ship groaned as it fought to keep its integrity, but the power it now contained was unlike anything the Zornak had ever encountered. The Zornak fleet, sensing a shift in the energy readings, attempted to regroup and launch a final assault. But it was already too late. With a deafening roar, Horizon's might unleashed its full weaponry. The ship fired everything it had. The plasma cannons, the electromagnetic pulses, the devastating energy torpedoes, all at once. The sheer force of the attack sent shockwaves rippling through space, shaking the Zornak fleet to its core. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the first explosion came. The Zornak flagship, which had been leading the charge, disintegrated into a massive fireball. The blast sent debris scattering across the battlefield, taking down a dozen smaller ships in its wake. But the Zornak were far from finished. "They're regrouping," the captain said, his voice grim. "They won't give up." Dr. Morgan watched as the Zornak ships maneuvered, their coordinated attack designed to overwhelm Horizon's might. Despite the destruction they had caused, they were still far outnumbered, and their ships were tougher than anything Earth had ever encountered. The ship was losing power fast, and Horizon's might's movements grew sluggish as the core's energy rapidly depleted. "We're down to our last reserves," the chief engineer called out, panic rising in his voice. "We can't keep this up." Dr. Morgan's mind raced. There was one final option, but it would require everything. The last-ditch weapon that could turn the tide. The ultimate sacrifice. She didn't have time to second-guess herself. "Prepare the quantum jump," Dr. Morgan said, her voice cold with determination. "We're going to end this." The crew froze, understanding the gravity of her words. Quantum jumping would send Horizon's might into a random location in space, but it could also take them deep into Zornak territory, an unthinkable risk. Yet it was their only hope. Dr. Morgan gave the final command, and the ship's engines roared to life as it initiated the jump. The crew held their breath as the warship disappeared into the folds of space. In an instant, Horizon's might was gone, leaving behind nothing but a void in the fabric of space where it had once stood. The crew braced for what they knew could be their final moments, but the ship's systems were still running, albeit on fumes. They had taken the desperate gamble, the quantum jump, and now they were adrift in the unknown. There was no telling where they had ended up. The Zornak were relentless, and the clock was ticking. The enemy would regroup, adapt, and pursue them with even greater force. But they had to hold on somehow. The emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting an eerie glow over the faces of the crew. Sweat beaded on Dr. Morgan's forehead as she sat at the console, monitoring the ship's systems. The quantum jump had drained almost every last bit of the ship's energy reserves, leaving them vulnerable. The ship was adrift, in unknown space, with no fuel to power its engines, no shields to protect it, and no way to defend itself. They were sitting ducks. "We're alive," the captain said, staring at the monitors, disbelief in his voice. "But we're alone." Dr. Morgan's hands flew across the console, searching for any kind of communication. She tried every frequency, every protocol, hoping for some sign of life. But the silence was overwhelming. It was as if they had been cast out into the void, cut off from everything they knew. There was no sign of Earth, no signal from any of the remaining human ships, and no trace of the Zornak. "We need to get out of here," one of the engineers said, his voice tinged with panic. "We don't have time to wait around." "We don't have any choice," Dr. Morgan replied, her voice calm but firm. "We have to wait for the systems to recharge. It's the only way we can survive." Time passed in agonizing silence. Hours turned to days. The crew grew restless, but they knew there was nothing they could do. Their fate, and the fate of humanity, was entirely in the hands of Horizon's might. Dr. Morgan never wavered. She worked tirelessly, recalibrating systems, trying to get the ship's core back online. But as the days dragged on, hope began to slip away. They were running out of time. Then, without warning, the console blinked to life. "Doctor," one of the engineers said, his voice filled with shock. "We're receiving a signal." It was faint, barely discernible through the static, but it was a signal nonetheless. It was coming from Earth. The message was fragmented, broken up by interference, but Dr. Morgan's heart soared as she made out the words. "This is Earth, not lost. Fight. Zornak. Humanity." The message was enough. It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't a plea for help. Earth had not fallen. Humanity was still fighting, and that meant they could still win. "Prepare for a jump," Dr. Morgan commanded. "We're going back." With the last of their energy reserves, Horizon's Might's engines flared to life once again. The ship hummed with power as the quantum jump sequence initiated, pulling the warship toward Earth. They would fight until the end. No matter the cost. No matter the odds. The crew of Horizon's Might knew that the final battle awaited them. This time, they would face the Zornak on their terms, with the full strength of humanity behind them. The war was far from over, but as the ship jumped through space, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity's spirit would not break. They would survive, and they would win.